Rob Greenlee. I'm really pleased to have Rob. Rob and I have been going back and forth for years now, it seems, and finally we get to be in the same place at the same time. I'm actually thrilled about that. Rob is the Executive Vice President and CTO for Courtside Entertainment Group, which is PodcastOne, the leading destination for the best and most popular podcasts across many top genres. Formerly, he spent 7 years managing the platform, content catalog, feature programming, and content provider relations. That's a mouthful. For the podcast service on Windows Phone and Xbox Music plus video hubs for Microsoft. Rob also co-hosts the New Media Show, which is terrific, that streams live on YouTube at 9 a.m. Pacific every Saturday and can be watched and heard as a video and audio podcast at the New Media Show or New Media Show?
New Media Show.
NewMediaShow.com. He founded and hosted the first broadcast radio program in the world to begin podcasting on September 14, 2004, which is amazing. Please welcome Rob Greenlee.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here and actually meet Mark in person. We've done podcasts together going back to like 2005, talking about radio and podcasting, so it's great to actually meet him, and it's great to be at this event. I watched it last year, and it just I feel honored to be here.
I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you.
This day would not be complete unless we touched in a meaningful way on podcasts, it seems to me.
Yep.
Can you just let people know, to whatever degree you can, just how popular are these things?
Well, I think it's been a growing phenomenon that's happened going way back to 2004, and actually even further back than that. I mean, I started doing a show online and I basically made my show available as a download for many, many years off of my website, and then podcasting started, and it was just a kind of an easy transition for me to actually make my show available. But really, I think it's just built up over time. It's just been a slow build. It's been, 10 years now? And it just takes 10 years for a medium to grow and become something significant in the space. And so I think we went through a little bit of a spell like in 2009, 2008, where it was a little bit of a dip in perception. It was about the time when the whole YouTube phenomenon and everybody got fascinated with social media and video and things like that. And I think things are coming full circle again, and I think podcasting is on a fast ramp up. And I think as new content comes in, and I think that the big thing that really catalyzed the fast growth of podcasting at this stage is the smartphone. And because all of us can get access to this content anytime, and I think that's the power of it. Back when podcasting started, it was all pointed at the iPod. And it was all this synchronization from your computer to some portable device, and that was a hassle for a lot of people, and a lot of people didn't know how to do it. So I think we're at this phase now where podcasting or on-demand audio is also another term that we're starting to use more of. I'm
all for on-demand audio over podcasting.
Yeah, just kind of on a fast growth curve, and it's all the things that have been talked about in the session today are all relevant. And I think podcasting has also been a place where there's been a lot of experimentation. There's been a lot of people trying new things. I mean, like the show that I do every Saturday is a live a YouTube video, it's an audio podcast, and it's a video podcast. So we're basically playing in all of the spaces. And that's exactly what podcasting has been since the very early days back when I started getting involved in it. Just a lot of experimentation. And I think what we're starting to see now is some models that are working, and audiences are connecting with this content. And like I said, it was all because of the smartphone.
Well, so give me some numbers. What are the magnitude of consumption on podcasts?
Well,
even if you had to pick a few, marquee names, what are they?
Well,
like?
it's hard to really say because podcasts are not kind of tracked in any kind of uniform way. I would say that the iTunes platform is probably the only place that has a big number, but they don't. Those folks don't really share that, so we don't really have access to deep data about the entire space of podcasting and on-demand audio. But I would say, just based on the numbers that I've seen, some of the larger hosts out there, Libsyn is a good one, has posted that there's, just in I think 2013, there's been like a billion downloads well, no, I guess it was billion subscriptions was actually posted on the iTunes area, and then I think it was like 5 to 6 billion downloads of files or shows. And so I think it's a huge growing area, but it doesn't have a lot of transparency, and that's one of the challenges of it. I know Podcast One, we have about 120 million downloads per month, just across the 200 shows that are currently on our platform. So as you can see, there's about a total space of about 250,000 podcasts, but nobody really knows that number today because there's no aggregate kind of service that tracks that. The iTunes platform has stated that they have 200 to 250,000 podcasts, but nobody really knows, and they don't really give exact numbers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You mentioned metrics.
Yeah.
Where are we on metrics for podcasts? I mean, even on Podcast One has control over some or more of the metrics. So help me understand what the ecosystem's like, and from a measurement standpoint, if I'm going to buy something, I want accurate data on what I get for it.
The whole side of tracking of downloads and metrics, it's still a little bit of a new, I would say an undefined area right now. And I know that Podcast One is working hard to try and define a standard out there. And there's a variety of host platforms or CDNs that have tracking processes or filters is probably a good term to describe it, to get to numbers, but the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of variability in that right now. So what needs to be done is a common standard that's basically established. And I know earlier in the program there was a discussion around, the ad buyers want to see common metrics across a lot of different digital mediums, right? And so it's easy for them to compare and contrast and to buy. But the podcast area is still kind of trying to find its way with that. Back in like 2006, there was an effort through a group, and I was on the board of that at that time. It's called the Association of Downloadable Media. Subsequently, about 2 years after it was formed, it disbanded, really because a lot of the players involved in it couldn't really agree on a go-forward standard for this. And so what we did actually come up with a base kind of standard that's still kind of used today, but it's not really accepted across the board. And since then, there's been a lot of kind of tweaking of it by individual players actually in the space. And so I keep coming back to this concept of for us to kind of bridge this digital divide between broadcast radio and podcasting, there needs to be something that speaks a common language between both sides and makes it easier for ad buyers to actually buy this content. And so that's what we're working on trying to do.
Yeah, and you may not be able to answer this question, but
Yep.
Can you talk about how publishers can best monetize podcasting content today and why advertisers should pay attention to the space?
Well, it's done all mostly in content today. So we're kind of playing, and I hope that this answers the question, but the common practices that have been going on in radio for a long time, spots and spots that are basically read by the hosts. But I do think it's really important that those spots be part of the content, not necessarily a break in the content. So I think that's a real important key to the effectiveness of podcast ads is they need to be trusted because they're read by the host, but there's also opportunities to make ads that are more kind of traditional ads kind of blend in with the content more and make it more of a targeted ad as well. So the ads need to be relevant to the audience. And I think that's the secret sauce to monetizing podcasting and to actually make it accepted by brand advertisers as well as direct response advertisers.
Lots of broadcasters create podcasts, obviously,
Yeah.
but almost no podcasts end up being on the radio. So why is that such a one-way path?
Well, it's because we're in a phase right now where the radio side, I believe, is still at the beginning stages of migrating to the digital side and to podcasting. And at some point, that migration is going to happen, but then there's going to be talent that comes from the podcasting space that then gets pulled over to the broadcast side. And I don't believe that we've reached that inflection point yet. I think an example of the guest that was up here earlier is a good example, I think, of where this is going. And that's that the talent's going to come from the online space first and go to radio. It's not going to go from radio to digital. But I don't believe that we're quite at that inflection point yet, but I think we're getting there. And I think as you're seeing with the popularity of YouTube and the ability to take niche content and create shows around that isn't available on broadcast, that will probably never be available on broadcast because it's not trying to reach a mass audience. Now, granted, Podcast One is focused on content that is trying to be a hits-driven kind of platform. Shows that we're looking to put on the platform, we want to have tens of or hundreds of thousands of downloads. So we are a hits-driven company, and we are looking for talent that can drive that even in a niche market, right? And as our other guests will kind of expand on that, yes.
Yeah, you're always creating new shows. You're always nurturing new shows, right? That's one of the efforts, to create shows that kind of break out of the mold. I want to introduce a special guest, one of the new shows on Podcast One, but it's someone who you may not recognize this person by their face, but you will certainly know them by their work.
This is the honey badger. Watch it run in slow motion. It's pretty badass. Look, it runs all over the place. Whoa, watch out, says that bird. Ew, it's got a snake. Oh, it's chasing a jackal. Oh my gosh. Oh, the honey badgers are just crazy. The honey badger has been referred to by the Guinness Book of World Records as the most fearless animal in all of the animal kingdom. It really doesn't give a shit. If it's hungry, it's hungry. Ew, what's that in its mouth? Oh, it's got a cobra? Oh, it runs backwards? Now watch this. Look, a snake's up in the tree. Honey badger don't care. Honey badger don't give a shit. It just takes what it wants. Whenever it's hungry, it just, ew, and it eats snakes? Oh my god, watch it dig. Look at that digging. The honey badger is really pretty badass. They have no regard for any other animal whatsoever. Look, and it's just grunting and ew, eating snakes. Ew, what's that, a mouse? Oh, that's nasty. Oh, they're so nasty.
Please welcome the host of Honey Badger's Badass Animal Podcast on Podcast One, Randall. Welcome. Have a seat.
Thanks for coming. There you go, right?
Before I sit down, let's give it up for Mark and to Jamie, who all day have been honey badgers. This has been a long-ass day. Let's
Randall,
give them, listen.
I have a surprise for you.
Oh. It speaks. They're nasty. They really are nasty.
Randall, tell us, what can you tell us about the honey badger that we don't know?
I can tell you a couple things. First off, prior to this video, they were a threatened species, which is actually no joke, but they were a threatened species, incredibly enough, because beekeepers were getting fed up with them and started putting them down themselves. And the only way to put down a honey badger, FYI, is to shoot it point blank in the head. How gross, right? Nasty. But seriously, in South Africa, a whole species of honey badger were threatened. And then since the video, they're now flourishing. So I have to say, that's pretty awesome.
How about that?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Colleen and Keith Begg, who originally shot the footage that I narrated, they have a lot of organizations in South Africa to help further educate the kids and everyone else about the wildlife, the amazing wildlife in South Africa. And great efforts have been made to help conserve and protect the honey badger, as crazy and nasty as it is. They do need a little help from us humans. So what they decided to do was, the beekeepers were like, these honey badgers are getting into our house of bees. They're ruining our business. So all they had to do was simply put the house of bees up in the sky. So now they exist on poles that are slippery and so these honey badgers can't get the scraps.
I got to tell you, my wife and I went to the zoo, and we went by the honey badger, and we stopped, and we had to spend extra time at the honey badger enclosure. And I swear to God, if you go to San Diego Zoo honey badger, you'll see that he's digging around the outside of the cage because he's trying to get out. And my wife said, I think he could get out.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh no, absolutely. They're like Houdinis. They're like little nasty ass Houdinis. It doesn't matter what you do to try to put them away or put them. They all figure out a way because they use tools. They're one of the few animals in the wild that actually use their claws and things to. They'll pick up a rock and smash things. They're very
Shovels.
smart.
They had a shovel. The one I saw had a shovel.
Yeah. See, I mean, really, never let a honey badger into the Home Depot ever. Seriously, they'll build you a shack in a second.
Is there any animal more fearsome than a honey badger?
Well, I think humans have the potential to be pretty badass as a species. Other than that, I have to say in the animal kingdom, if you folks are aware of this animal called the slow loris in the house, anyone know of slow loris? They're kind of primates. They look a little like Don Knotts, and they're actually venomous. And the crazy thing is they store the venom. Whoops, there goes honey badger. He don't give a shit, please. He's gonna get back up and just start running around. But so the slow loris, what they do is they have a venom that they keep inside their armpit, and they'll just take a little and they smear it on their babies when they know that they're gonna go out and get snacks and feed the family. To protect their babies, they put a little venom from their armpits, and then they lick. And the saliva mixed with the secretion from their armpits forms this gross venom that actually so they're a venomous primate. I think that's pretty badass. And they really don't care.
They don't get. There's a theme there. So listen, the podcast, Badass Animal Podcast on Podcast One. Tell us about the podcast.
Well, it really is.
It's not all honey badger, right?
It's not all honey badger, but it's since the video and everything else, honey badgering has become, it's a verb. It's also, it's a thing like, oh, you're gonna honey badger something. So in a way, I do honey badger animal rights and issues and things and some humanitarian things because it's a crazy world we live in presently. But I'm proud to say that on Podcast One, this is really the only podcast of its kind that I find. I'm speaking about wildlife and animals. Pet podcasts are, they do exist, and I do touch upon pets and the best ways to protect and adopt and spay and neuter. But there are a lot of crazy things. For instance, right now in the United States, I don't know if you folks are aware, but there are more states that allow one to own an exotic animal than same-sex marriage. Allow me to repeat, there are more states in the United States where you can own an exotic animal, but you can't marry a lover. So this means if you're in Florida, a gay couple can have a tiger in the backyard. They just can't get married. So it's issues like this and things that I want to bring to the forefront, and I figure if I got all these views on YouTube, it's a great way it's a springboard. What it allows me to do, this podcast, Honey Badger's Badass Animal Podcast, is really just discuss animal news and wildlife news because studies are showing that kids and a lot of folks they're not hip to a lot of wildlife information and things like this. And when I asked who knows the slow loris, I mean really, come on, what kind of response was this?
You actually knew the slow loris.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
But anyone know what an is?
What's an I
got one arm. They're a primate that also looks like Don Knotts, and they're very crazy.
What is it with primates and Don Knotts?
I don't know what it is. It's like Return to Mayberry. But my podcast with what I'm doing, I'm very excited because only one of its kind in space. And when I have celebs and things like in interviews, I have interviews in animal news. It doesn't matter who I have on, it's going to get to animals. So even if I'm interviewing with a celebrity, yeah, what are you up to? Okay, that's great. Now, tell me about your dog. That's really what I'm into. And what's great is because of the space and the day and age we're living in, I can take these episodes and put them onto YouTube, which is fantastic. And I found out from the producer, Arthur, and everyone at podcast, they're like, that helps us. That counts as someone listening and downloading and listening to the show. So that's great. And we live in this day and age where people DVR things. People aren't watching things live. They're not listening to things live anymore. Mm-hmm. So to have the luxury to be able to listen to the programs or watch the programs that you want on your time, that's what it's all about. And I realize there are people who are driving. They're not going to be able to look on YouTube, and I want them to hear me. So listen to the podcast.
That's the answer. Questions from the audience for Rob Greenlee or Randall.
So great to meet you. I love the stuff. I love animals. I love nature. I just downloaded it so I could watch it. So how many viewers do you have?
Are we talking YouTube or listeners on the podcast?
Either way.
Podcast, I'm not too sure. I don't know how it's going. It's still fairly fresh. So I'm doing all I can to promote. PodcastOne's been absolutely amazing. And you know what's interesting and something that should be noted is I don't think I could do something like this on my own. I'll tell you that much. Like I know, God bless them, a lot of podcasters out there are able to do it on their own. I would not be able to do it on my own. And I just, thank goodness that, Podcast One exists. I go in, I'm able to record, blah, blah. Channel views on YouTube, it's over 97 million. Wow. It's over 97 million. I'm getting messages from kids saying, hey, I'm learning more from you than I am my biology teacher, or I wish you were teaching me life sciences. And it's...
Plus, I use the phrase badass around the house now.
I'd love to see one of those reports in school.
I mean, it's nuts. You know, what it's done, it's when you get a call from the Sarah Palin's people asking you to create a video because they want you to, boost Sarah Palin and do a campaign video. I said, really? Well, yeah, Randall, because she's badass. Okay. I can make a Sarah Palin video. I don't know how badass it's going to be.
And have you been approached by sponsors?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, we're all badass. It's become a thing. We're all honey badgers to a certain degree. There are things that we don't care, we don't really want to deal with, and I think that's why it resonates. I think people...
I agree. I wrote a blog 8 months ago, if you're going to be an ass, be a badass.
There you go.
Exactly.
But I want to ask you another question. Tell me about some sponsors that approach you, how you incorporate them into your show, and what they've seen.
Well, as Rob touched upon earlier, I love being able to slip in the talking points and the ads in the content. And that's something I'm also trying to do these days with my YouTube videos. If I could put a bumper or a special video that promotes something, or I got a sponsor, I'd rather embed it and put it as part of the work as opposed to something separate. Because now I'm forcing you, the viewer, to watch. And I think companies right now in 2014 are waking up and they're like, wait a second. People on Hulu and YouTube are forced to watch ads? And it's like, yes, because they're not watching it when you DVR it. I'm skipping right by your ad. If I'm listening in the car, I'm just switching the station. So with podcasts and videos, you have to listen. So I've been very fortunate enough to jump from one project to another, and people realize, there are people that watch and find out their information on YouTube. It's the second highest searched engine, right? It's the second most used. Now, behind Google. People are looking for information on YouTube. That's crazy.
Are you getting any pushback from parents on the language at all?
Well, since the success of that video, I put up a censored one for the kids. A little too late, but I put one up there. I also have a version in Spanish. And I'm looking soon to do Japanese and French. But, no, because you know what? The kids are watching Game of Thrones.
That's true.
I'll stop hogging the mic.
No problem. Was there one more question?
Yeah, for Rob. I work in public radio where podcasting has been going on for a long time. And one of the things that I always wonder in this thing about trying to get a measure that goes across all platforms is how do you take account for the question of it's downloaded, but is it listened to, and how much of it is listened to?
Yeah, I think that's that's definitely a big challenge, and I don't think anybody has an answer to that quite yet. I think it's a technology solution that hasn't arrived, quite yet. I know that there's been some experimentation in the research lab around media files that will report home, once they've been played, but it's never become a standard. It's never happened. That would be the only solution, right? But I think to kind of answer kind of where it's going versus where we are, clearly the consumption of this stuff is moving more towards streaming. And I see that even with podcasting. More people are just clicking play, and that is growing. And as that grows, then that whole download model, that download issue kind of goes away.
Thanks for the question. Guys, we are out of time. I want to thank Rob Greenlee, CTO at Podcast One. I want to thank Randall, host of Randall's Badass Animal Podcast on Podcast One.